Hello, fancy folks. Welcome back to another episode of Luxi, a podcast to spark your curiosity by exploring the intersection of luxury and science. I'm your host, Dr. Lex, global health enthusiast, labeler of way too many test tubes, and wearer of sunglasses even when it rains. And special treat, I'm joined today by...
Demos. Dr. Demos is back.
Yay! We thought for this, the final episode of season 3, we'd bring in a ringer.
All right. Ready to ring.
So today we're talking about the useful, helpful, and fashionable accessory, sunglasses. This topic was suggested to me by a friend of the pod, Ben, of Science Actually and the Nerd and the Scientist podcasts. While science glasses are different.
Science glasses.
While sunglasses evolved from a need, they became the needed accessory of the fashion set, an easy way to change up your look or appear more mysterious. In this episode, we'll explore the origins of sunglasses, the science behind how they protect your eyes, and of course, a little something extra too, because there's never enough science. So come and be curious with us. Demos, do you know anything about the history of sunglasses?
No, I don't actually. And when you told me about this episode, I was really kind of fascinated. So I did some research and I've got a few little details about acrylic and some other interesting ways to make sunglasses, but I don't know anything about the old stuff.
So the native Alaskan people, including the Inuit community, are credited with the earliest sunglasses. They fashioned snow goggles from flattened whale or caribou ivory with narrow slits in them. This allowed them to see better in the blinding all-white conditions of the frozen north. Many native tribes of North America and Asia fashioned such eye protection. The first sunglasses, as we would recognize them, came from China in the 12th century or earlier. They were flat planes of smoky quartz that offered glare reduction, which is still one of the primary reasons people wear sunglasses.
And if you've ever looked through smoky quartz, that's not exactly the type of glass that is going to make things clear. So these people really needed some help reducing glare. Well,
I don't know. There are reports of ancient Chinese judges using these glasses to obscure their eyes while making their judgments.
Yep. I'll say, wow.
So from then on, there are reports of using tinted lenses to protect from glare, whether on horseback in the snow or riding through a gondola in Venice. Very fashionable ladies used to have such glasses. Antoine Lavoisier, of the famed experiments with lenses.
Okay. Yeah.
Who worked with amplified sunlight, was reported to have a pair of sunglasses, and it was a common accessory for railway travelers by the 19th century. But it was Jean-Marie Theodore Fusel, a journalist, who first argued in print that yellow-tinted glasses could provide protection from UV rays. By 1899, there were sunglasses made specifically to block UV rays. In the 1920s, the use of sunglasses became more widespread. It was Sam Foster who made the first lenses out of celluloid in 1929, and these were inexpensive to mass produce, and the rest, as they say, was history.
Wow. So plasticky type sunglasses have been around since the 30s, since the 1920s.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. Aesthetics and trends and glare aside, what are sunglasses supposed to do? So they block UV rays, but do you know why that is so important?
The little bit of research I did showed that there's the ability for the retina, especially with children, to be damaged irreparably by exposure to too many UV rays. You can even get essentially like sunburn on the eye.
Yeah. So I think we're going to take a step back and review a little bit of eye anatomy to make sure everyone knows what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Do you remember dissecting a cow's eye in science class? Did you do that?
I never got a chance to dissect a cow's eye.
It's one of my seminal school memories, and that should probably tell you a little bit about why I became a scientist.
Wow, it takes a special person.
It was really cool. The chicken thigh grossed me out, but the cow's eye I thought was fascinating. Mm-hmm. So according to the American Academy of Ophthalmology, which is where I found a great primer on eye anatomy, the eye sits in a bony socket called the orbit, and it's anchored by 6 muscles that move the eye all around.
Yeah.
The white part of your eye is called the sclera and is a strong layer of tissue that covers most of the eye. And the surface of the eye is also covered in a thin layer called the conjunctiva. Interesting fun fact. Did you know that tears are actually made of 3 separate things? There's 3 layers to your tears.
3 different chemicals that Turn
Yeah.
into a tear?
So it's called the tear film because it's actually layered. So there's mucus from the conjunctiva, water from your lacrimal glands, and oil from the meibomian
Wow.
gland, which
Meibomian.
sure I'm not saying correctly, but
Okay.
that's how it's spelled.
Mhm.
So the front domed part of your eye is the cornea, and that is where a lot of the light is focused in your eye. The colored part of your eye is the iris. I think most people know that, right? And it's behind the cornea, and there's an anterior chamber filled with fluid that maintains your eye pressure. The dark hole in the iris is a pupil, and the muscles in the iris constrict and dilate the pupil to control the amount of light that enters the eye. And this is actually why kids are not as affected by glare as adults because their muscles that control their pupil are actually, because they're kids, right? The muscles are stronger, and so they can dilate their pupils.
So the pupil can be smaller.
Yeah, they can constrict and dilate better than adults can. Behind the pupil is the lens, which is kind of hard and bouncy, if I remember correctly, from my Kel's eye. And this helps the eye to see objects close up. Fun fact, 70% of the eye's focusing capacity comes from the cornea and 30% comes from the lens.
No kidding.
Yeah. So the light that is focused by the cornea and the lens then goes through the vitreous humor, a jelly-like substance, to hit the retina at the back of the eye. And this is the goal. The retina is a light-sensitive tissue that contains the rods and the cones and the other optic
Which we did
cells.
an episode about.
Yeah. So reminder, rods are for black and white and night vision, and cones are for color. There's also on the retina a spot called the macula, which is responsible for sharp detail. And the rest of the retina is for more that peripheral vision.
Okay.
When light hits the retina, it sends electrical impulses to the brain via the optic nerve, and these reach the visual cortex in the brain, and that's how you see.
Good primer.
I thought so. So why is sunlight bad if we need light to see?
Well, sunlight has a lot more than just visible light coming out of its spectrum.
It does. So a great review authored by P.N. Youssef et al. In the Scientific Journal of the Royal College of Ophthalmologists, otherwise known as Eye, the journal Eye, in 2011 highlights the light damage that can be done to the eye. And there's a long history of scientists warning people about looking at the sun. Way back at 360, Socrates warned of injury to the bodily eye by observing and gazing on the sun during an eclipse. Solar damage to the retina was first studied clinically in 1916 and all the way through present day where doctors use lasers, i.e. light, to selectively damage retinal tissue to help cure some eye diseases. So there's 3 types of damage that can happen when light gets the retina: photothermal, photomechanical, and photochemical. So remember that light is both a spectrum of wavelengths and has the properties of particles.
Yes.
So both of these come into play when you talk about damage.
A wave and a particle at the same time.
Right. So photothermal damage happens when the photon of light is transferred to the retinal tissue. So the retina absorbs light and that photon is energy.
Sounds like it gets too hot.
It does. So what happens is it increases the kinetic energy of the tissue, and the molecules then collide with each other and the temperature increases. So basically, the molecules get excited by the photon being there and they start wiggling around and they get hot.
This is like what you would get if you had a laser hit your eyeball?
Yes, exactly. So this causes the denaturing or unfolding of proteins, loss of molecular structure, and the fluidization of membranes, and ultimately leads to cell death. Now, your body can absorb a certain amount of cell death and repair itself and regenerate cells, but you get to a point where that's not going to work anymore. So this type of damage is the damage that's used by lasers. Doctors use lasers to treat various retinal eye diseases.
Yeah.
Photomechanical damage, and this is when the forces generated by rapid introduction of energy into the retina. So when there's an introduction of energy, i.e. light, photons, it's more rapid than the relaxation time needed to relieve the mechanical stress on the tissue by that expansion when the molecules get all excited. So this makes microcavitation bubbles.
Whoa.
And I know you know a little about something about cavitation in bigger systems. This is microcavitation.
Rocket engines.
Yes, this is a very small scale where there's this expansion and the tissue isn't allowed to rest long enough to have those forces relax. And so it makes these bubbles and they're lethal to retinal cells.
No kidding.
And these forces can also cause shock waves that can result in permanent damage. And this all sounds very big, but it's happening on this really microscopic scale in individual retinal cells.
I wonder if that's like what would happen if you watched the welder's arc or something.
Could be, yeah.
Where you would get such an enormous flash of light. It's not a laser light.
No.
The flash is powerful and extremely intense.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah.
And then photochemical damage is basically damage that's not photothermal or photomechanical. and it's thought to be the most common. And it could be caused by exposure of the retina to generated free radicals that happen when you have long-term exposure.
Yeah. Radiation damage in
Essentially,
your body
yes.
is from free radicals.
So it's lower wavelengths, i.e. higher energy light exposure.
Yes.
So the big risk with light exposure anywhere in your body, from your skin to anywhere, is the absorption of the light and the potential cellular or tissue damage. But since we're not all walking around with sun-related eye damage, clearly your body has a mechanism to ward off most of this. So the cornea, the lens, and the vitreous fluid in the eye all absorb parts of the UV spectrum to limit exposure of damaging wavelengths to the retina.
Yeah.
Just like Demos said, there's wavelengths of light that are beyond the visible light that we can see, and those are usually the ones that do the damage.
Yep.
So the cornea absorbs all UVC and most UVB light, while the lens absorbs UVB and all UVA light. Additionally, macular pigments are also thought to absorb relatively high energy blue light. And so while the eyes contain these and other protection mechanisms against light damage, they're not enough on their own.
Yeah.
Did you read up something about the UV rays?
Well, I was just reading a little bit about UVB, UVA, and UVC. So the way I understand it is UVA is the most basic. There's UVA, UVB, and UVC. And UVC, I think, is the least damaging of the light, if I don't have it backwards. And that's closer to the visible light spectrum.
Yeah, I think if it's closer to the visible light spectrum, it's less damaging.
And then as we push out to deeper purple, indigo, and then invisible, but still damaging, that's when we hit the ultraviolet. Then we're going to like 380, 390, and 400 nanometer.
Yeah. And like we said, lower wavelength, 380, 390, 400, 390, 380, lower wavelength equals higher energy.
Yes. Until we get to like X-rays or even lower wavelength. This can certainly provide some damage. So indeed.
Yeah. And a really, I guess, pertinent example of eye damage is in my family. So my grandmother had macular degeneration. And in this disease, your central vision becomes blurred, and it's still unknown which of the aging processes or light exposure does the damage. There have been longitudinal studies looking at sun exposure factors, such as facial hyperpigmentation and facial wrinkle length. And they did not find any associations of these variables with macular degeneration, but it's hard to tell you can't just shine sunlight in someone's eye until they get macular degeneration, right? Like it's not ethical to do that. So looking at these proxy variables for sun exposure like hyperpigmentation, and those don't have any link with the disease, but clinicians still support a role for photochemical oxidative stress as a cause or a factor in the disease. And so many doctors advise using supplementary carotenoids like lutein to prevent or manage the disease. And I'm still going to wear my sunglasses at every single opportunity. Demos can attest to this. I wear my sunglasses even on cloudy days.
Smart. I mean, there's people who get the dark spots in their eyes as they get older. What's that called?
That's not the cataracts, right?
Yeah, cataracts. I can't believe I forgot the name.
And that's sun damage.
Yeah,
cataracts is sun damage. Yeah.
Why not? Yeah, don't get cataracts. Wear your sunglasses.
About sunglasses, Demos, you did a little bit of research about how sunglasses are made and how exactly they block the UV light.
Well, I'll tell you right now, cellulose sunglasses, probably not your best choice.
Well, I don't know if those are on the market as much anymore.
However, I believe that if you darken cellulose enough and then give it a mirror finish by sputtering metal on it, for example, you can sputter gold onto cellulose because cellulose really ends up being some kind of like Scotch tape. It's essentially an early form of plastic. Now that's important. One of the things plastics are really good at doing is being tinted with other chemicals because they accept other organics because they themselves are organics. So we're just mixing in this soup.
Just add something else to the polymer.
Yeah. But if I'm not mistaken, and I will check this, cellulose may actually be a classic example of how you can make the same kind of lenses that we're using for watching the solar eclipse.
Oh, okay.
Because you look at those solar eclipse glasses, they're super cheap.
Yep.
And they're very thin and very flexible.
Yeah.
Now, that means they're not what normal sunglasses are, which is acrylic.
Yeah.
So when you go into to a drugstore, you have a whole section of inexpensive sunglasses. Yeah. And I often wondered, as many people do, like, can you really trust what a $5 pair
yeah, is that really going to protect you from anything?
Well, what I've seen more and more is you'll see a piece of a sticker on it that says UV 400.
That's the one you need to get.
Now, what is going on there? Well, what I found out was acrylic, by nature of its electron band gap, its ability to filter out certain wavelengths or certain particles of photons. Certain particles of photons expend energy when they go through something like glass or your eyeball or anything else. But if that wave particle doesn't have the right amount of energy, it can be either blocked or allowed to pass through. It either can pay the toll at the toll booth or it can't. And if it can't pay the toll by having enough energy to get to that next stage, it's going to be stuck. What happens is that this photon is absorbed. The photon can be absorbed because it doesn't have enough energy to actually get through the glass or get through the acrylic. And so what we call that is a band gap. And it's essentially the energy that's built into that color of light and the energy of the material it's going through.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, there are a lot of transistors. If you look at the circuit in your computer, let's say the main processor, the main processor in your computer is a transparent piece of crystal.
Oh,
surprisingly. And
I don't think most people have opened their computers up.
Yeah, but if you can pull that silicon off, you'll find out that the processor is transparent to infrared and to very long wavelengths of light. And it's really just because the band gap is engineered to handle electrons operating at a certain speed. So what happens is when you hit those frequencies of those electrons, they're very close to the frequencies of light. So what we do is we engineer these band gaps to allow or not allow circuits, otherwise known as a digital 1 or a digital 0,
to go through
to do math with, or to store data on your hard drive, or whatever you want digital data to be. Quantum mechanics kind of helps define whether it's a good sunglass or a bad sunglass.
So basically, it's to be really simplistic about it. The light sort of gets trapped in the lens as opposed to going all the way through and hitting your retina.
It gets absorbed. It results in just generating heat instead of turning into something that can generate heat in your eye.
Right.
Or any of the other terrible things that could be occurring in your eye. None of which I remember.
It's okay.
So what is interesting is acrylic on its own, fresh acrylic out of the factory floor, blocks 63% of UV without any treatment.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty good. However, with just a little bit of chemical engineering, you can make 100% block at 400 nanometers.
That's probably why it's so cheap then, because acrylic itself is pretty cheap to make now.
And it's 17 to 20 times more strength than glass. So acrylic is actually very strong. Now, some people will say, hey, but wait, you didn't mention the other lens that we use all the time in prescription glasses, which is polycarbonate. Polycarbonate is 100 times stronger than glass.
So it's good to have polycarbonate lenses.
It is. However, polycarbonate is not inherently capable of blocking UV.
I'm sure there's a treatment.
So yes, you have to put a treatment or a surface layer. And so generally what you do with polycarbonate prescription lenses is you provide the polycarbonate, then you do an anti-reflective coating, which is a chemical coating, a UV coating, and then another anti-reflective coating, and then whatever additional coating that you can place for the purposes of tinting. But at its core, the polycarbonate is going to be clear. Great example of polycarbonate we see every day, the headlight lenses of our cars. Those are polycarbonate as well. However, polycarbonate doesn't do that well with UV. No. And if you noticed, old headlight lenses on cars get foggy, even turn yellow. But we can't use acrylic for the same reason, because it's not as strong as polycarbonate.
You don't want your headlights being knocked out all the time.
So that's why you'll notice that inexpensive sunglasses that you would buy are actually quite flexible. However, acrylic is excellent for light transmissivity. It doesn't bend light. And in a very well-designed 2 millimeter sheet, which is all you need, you can make an excellent sunglass
That's good to know.
And a high quality one with not a lot of cost.
That's great to know for people like me who routinely lose their sunglasses. So I do not usually invest a lot of money in them.
Yeah, I mean, look, great sunglasses are great, and one of the recommendations from the College of Ophthalmology is to use wraparound sunglasses.
Yeah.
Because UV likes to bounce.
Yes, it does.
It's going to bounce off the ground. It's going to bounce off of car windows. It's going to bounce off of anything, water especially.
That actually brings us to the other aspect of sunglasses, which was the first reason they were made, and that's glare.
Yeah, yeah.
So do you know there's a definition for glare?
No, really?
Yeah. So usually, like you said, light bounces off at angles and is scattered, but flat surfaces, like calm waters, cause the light to bounce off all at one angle. And it hits your eye. Yeah, it hits your eye at that one angle, and that's glare. And so it's very important to reduce glare, especially for certain professions like fishermen and things like that.
Pilots, airline pilots.
And so polarized sunglasses. Sunglasses are polarized to reduce glare from non-metallic surfaces. Polarized lenses are designed to let in specific wavelengths of light and block others. And so the chemical treatment of the lens allows vertical light wavelengths and blocks the horizontal wavelengths.
Well, it blocks not the wavelengths itself, but the wave.
The wave, yeah.
So waves that are coming in at 90-degree angles or angles that are normal to the incident surface. It's like oh gosh, I'm trying to think of a good way. It's like a slot in an arcade game where you're trying to slide a coin in. Yeah. Because light, depending on how it bounces off of surfaces, can come in up and down or side to side.
Yeah.
And so if you have slots or slits that are tiny slits that you can't see but are built into the glass.
That's polarized.
One great example of that is and one way you can tell if you're wearing good polarized lenses is many cell phone screens are polarized because they use liquid crystal displays. And so if you turn your head and you can't see your screen, that means you got a good set of polarizing lenses on.
That's good to know. And then one last interesting point from the College of Ophthalmology. Did you know that outdoor play can help reduce nearsightedness in kids?
Really?
Yeah, they didn't go into the mechanisms. I'm not sure if people understand the mechanisms, but one study they cited showed that 40 minutes of extra play can decrease the risk of nearsightedness in children.
Oh, wow. Is it because of the exposure to ultraviolet light?
They didn't say.
Well, I am fascinated as usual.
So I have one last point about sunglasses.
Okay.
Or maybe a larger fun fact, if you will, a fun paragraph.
Okay, fun paragraph. Tell me more.
So I never understood how Superman could fool everybody by putting on a pair of glasses and becoming Clark Kent, right?
Yeah.
Like I thought that was like, duh, everybody should know that's Superman, right? Yeah. Or like how celebrities wear sunglasses and then go around expecting to be incognito, right? But it turns out there's something to it. A paper published in Scientific Reports in 2013 by Charles Orr et al. Looked at face masks versus sunglasses for masking facial identity. So the authors used colored images of 130 males, and they added to these images digitally either full face coverings, sunglasses, or surgical masks. And then they showed these images to 24 people. So participants saw a series of faces, then determined whether a series of test faces, some from the first series and some not, were in the first series. So basically you look at some faces and then you kind of try to memorize them. And then you look at a new set of faces and see which ones you can identify, right? Okay. The researchers found that sunglasses led to a larger reduction in the sensitivity to faces. So people could remember less faces if they had sunglasses on. The faces, not that person looking at it. So the researchers hypothesized that the upper portion of the face is more important for facial recognition than the lower portion of the face. And this study was conducted because during COVID, people were worried about facial recognition with the masks on. But it turns out maybe not robots, but people have fairly good facial recognition with surgical masks on, but not necessarily with sunglasses. Yeah. So maybe Superman was onto something.
I guess so. It makes me wonder how like my phone can tell when it face IDs me.
Because your phone is not a person. Like the way that we perceive and recognize facial structures is different than a way that your phone does it or a way that
like that facial recognition
software does it. Yeah.
Okay.
So we are a little bit, I would say, more complex and a little bit different in how we recognize people.
Neat.
Yeah. I thought that was kind of cool.
Fun fact.
It is a fun fact. That might be our fun fact for the episode.
I think so. I think so. Well, we should probably use some definitions, right?
Oh, we should, right? Should we talk about all the different photo damages?
Yeah, let's go over those. Those are great.
Okay, so photothermal damage is the transfer of a photon of light to the retina tissue that increases the energy and thus of the molecules in the tissue and thus increases their temperature. So energy hits, molecules get excited, dance around, get too hot.
Yeah.
Photomechanical is that there's forces that are made when these molecules are excited and there's not enough time for the tissue to rest in between exposures. And so you get microcavitation bubbles and shock waves in the tissue. And photochemical damage is pretty much anything else, but most likely is associated with free radical damage.
Okay.
So those are the 3 types of photo-related damage to your retinal cells.
And let me throw in a one that I brought up that
Yeah.
might be a little weird. That's called band gap.
Yes, that's a good one.
And it's not the time between musicians' tour dates where they go for a long time.
I thought maybe it's a time between the sets.
Yeah, the band gap. That is, oh boy, you are such a nerd. That's beautiful. I love that.
By the way, I think that would be a great band name.
Band gap. So essentially what it has to do is it's a little bit of quantum mechanics, and it essentially says that electrons can only fit into specific places or orbitals around an atom. And those orbitals are determined by where atoms are in respect to electrons around the other atom. The case of glass, if the photons can't elevate an electron to the next level of its existence, the next point of its existence relative to other electrons, then that energy can't be absorbed. So it passes through the glass. But if you can energize the existing electrons, all of that structure that's already in the material that we know of as glass or acrylic or plexiglass or polycarbonate, then that band gap is compatible with that energy, absorbs the energy, and instead of that energy passing through, gets sucked up and stays in the material.
Very
like
cool.
your 2 millimeter thick cheap sunglasses.
So I have 2 more fun facts.
Oh, wow. Hit me.
Tears are made up of 3 layers.
Oh, that was a good one.
I know, I did not
I'm
say
glad
that.
you reminded me.
Mucus and water and oil. And 70% of the eye's focusing capacity comes from your cornea and 30% comes from your lens.
Another fun fact.
I thought so. So thank you.
Let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up. Thank you for going on this last journey of the season with us. I currently have 2 pairs of sunglasses in my purse because, as I mentioned before, I have a bit of a propensity for losing them.
Yeah.
Not even breaking them. I just lose them. I hope that you heard something that sparked your curiosity and you already have Google open looking to learn a little bit more. Starting in 2 weeks, we'll have our summer interview series. This summer is a fun one. We talk with other science podcasters about their favorite luxury items. And I have to admit, there are some in there that I would not have predicted. So it's going to be really fascinating.
Air conditioning is my luxury item.
Well, maybe I'll interview you.
Okay. So hot.
If you learned something new, please pass it on to a friend by sharing the podcast. And don't forget to click that subscribe button. Nothing is more satisfying than a good click. Lexi Podcast is an Aravana media production produced by me, Dr. Lex. Audio engineer is Dr. Demos, and our theme music is Harlequin Mood by Birdie. You can find us all over social media at Lexi Pod. Feel free to jump us a line, to drop us.
Jump us a line, won't you?
Yeah, there you go. That's going to be our new tagline. Jump us a line. We always love to hear from you. And now for a little snippet of a podcast that we're really enjoying, and we hope you enjoy it too.
So, have you ever thought about what would happen if your airline window popped out? Or if you could build a jetpack using only machine guns? Turns out you can, but you really, really shouldn't. Hi, I'm Jill Chacha, host of a podcast that's for weird people who like learning about weird stuff. It's called, well, That's Interesting, and it's a comedy science-y show that tells the story behind the facts because those stories are funny. Every Thursday, I tell the tale behind an odd new discovery, like how researchers found 2 mysterious structures surrounding Earth's core, or how it's actually possible to stop hiccups using a rectal massage. Yes, there's a story behind that. No pun intended. And I tell the story because storytelling is the perfect way to learn and remember. The facts are bizarre, the stories are epic, and the laughter is plentiful. So, join the flock and listen to All That's Interesting wherever you do podcasts.